Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Tech Chat. Now, on today's episode, I'm speaking to a returning guest. We've got Ian Johnson, who's the Managing Director of Europe at Marqeta. So Ian, welcome back to the show and thanks for joining us.
Hi Max, yeah, thanks for having me back again.
Very welcome, and I'm looking forward to delving into today's subject. For long-time viewers of Tech Chat, just cast your mind back, because last time we spoke about the current modernization of the finance industry we talked about traditional banks, digital banks, and fintech. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the current state of the banking industry and legacy technology systems in response to a survey that you guys conducted on the 2020 European banking. So I wanted to start the episode here by just asking you what the study wanted to find out and why it was conducted in the first place.
Yeah, well, we were very conscious of the fact that the pandemic has created a pretty significant shift in consumer behavior when it comes to payments and their interaction with financial services. So obviously contactless as kind of transactions have gone through the roof. There's been a huge increase in use of digital wallets, and knowing that banking industry has already been challenged to keep up with the challenger banks, the likes of Revolut, Monzo, Starling, etc. We were keen to hear from them as to how they were experiencing the pandemic and the challenges they faced, and how they were adapting how they do business to try to keep up, essentially. So that's the reason that we undertook this study in the first place.
Excellent. So the meat of the matter when it comes to talking about a survey is, what were the main findings that you had, and were there any results in there that kind of stood out and surprised you?
Well, whether we were surprised or not, I'm not sure, but it was a ringing endorsement that kind of 94% of the banks that responded said that they felt that the speed and pace of change was very, very significant, and that they were struggling to keep up with the move to more digital payments and those type of instruments, and that effectively this had become something of a technology arms race. If you didn't have the right tech, it was almost impossible to keep up with what was happening in the market. As we know, fintechs have a very different way of doing business. They're very rapid to deploy new technologies, which means that they're able to take advantage of situations. They're also very readily capable of addressing challenges when they arise. So it was great to see that all of the banks acknowledged, or almost all the banks acknowledged, the fact that technology was key here, and that things had to happen and things had to change.
Yeah, obviously that's such a big area for any organization, whether it's banking or whatever, to kind of get that technology implemented. And it always comes back, and especially when we're talking about banking, there's that issue of the legacy infrastructure that plays into all of this. So Are there any ways in which organizations can tackle or manage that so they can get to this point of introducing new technologies?
The first thing is an acknowledgement of the fact that problem exists, and 85% of the banks acknowledge the fact that legacy technologies were holding them back. It wasn't too long ago that you couldn't get an acknowledgement from that large a proportion of a survey to accept the fact that the existing infrastructure was a problem. We consider that these banks have got sometimes as many as 2,000 different individual apps that make up their overall financial services offering. That's a huge undertaking to try to change. What we see increasingly from banks is a desire to create something as new as possible from scratch. So an acknowledgement that unpicking the legacy technologies that are holding them back, unpicking them, replacing them, that whole exercise is so huge, such a big undertaking, and nobody really has had a success in doing it. There's been some pretty horrific tales of how much money banks have spent trying to do this. So the one way that we see for sure is what's termed as kind of creating a greenfield bank. So a greenfield bank is not just necessarily new technology, but can also be a completely new brand. So banks just saying, okay, we're going to come to market with something that's new and fresh, on a brand new technology infrastructure, and it's going to look and feel much more like a challenger bank or a kind of fintech, but it's going to be underpinned by this huge, multi-billion-dollar company. So that's the way that we see that people can adapt, because quite frankly, Max, the project timelines to unpick 2,000 applications that all hang together to deliver financial services is just too long to react. By the time you've even agreed within a bank to do something, the whole market has shifted onto the next thing.
Yeah, definitely. But it's so surprising to kind of hear this, because when we're looking at the stats, it's, 84%, 85% are struggling with this issue of these legacy systems. I mean, you're saying it's difficult to kind of catch up, and I think that is true, because obviously banking and finance is such a fast-paced industry. So where is this kind of bottleneck happening? Is there a way to kind of remove that stopgap? As you say, the greenfield option is a great way to go. But what's the reality of this?
Well, there's a few things I'd say. The first thing I would say is that let's not think that fintechs have got a monopoly on all the best tech talent in the industry, because they don't. The banks are jam-packed with great talent, and they've got thousands and thousands of people who have the capability. So it's not that they don't have the resources available. But if you think culturally, banks have traditionally been made up of many, many committees who take a very long time to make a decision about anything. So putting the technology to one side, the people to one side, just a cultural shift to try to adapt to be much more agile in how you make decisions, how you design products, how you get them out to market, you test those products and fail early and adapt. It's such a huge cultural shift for banks, and you have so many the people that banks employ to bring into them to change that culture. They have to convince so many stakeholders in the bank before a single line of code is written. So that is one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, 100% agree. But I feel like the demand is reaching that kind of peak point for a lot of banks from their customers. So there is that kind of push forward to get to that level that's needed. And I really hope that we kind of see that evolution, especially over the next 12 months. Ian, thank you for coming on once again. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in this survey that people can take away from this. So thanks for giving us the overview on today's episode.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who took the time to watch this episode. If you are looking for more information and on the survey itself, you can head over to marqeta.com for fantastic resources and more information on what we've discussed today. We'll obviously be back next week with another episode in our Tech Chat series. Until then, please join the conversation at EM360 on Twitter and LinkedIn. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And for more great daily content, head on over to em360tech.com.